Office of the United States Trustee is a subdivision of the U.S. Department of Justice, and there are offices in every district in the country. This is, of course, a federal role here. Now, generally speaking, in bankruptcy, the U.S. Trustee has just a few big goals. One is to police the integrity of the system, to make sure that the debtor who files under a particular chapter really is eligible for that kind of relief. So, for example, if somebody seeks Chapter 7 protection and has income that's way, way off the charts, that trustee will step in and say, you really don't belong in Chapter 7, and will seek to either dismiss the case or give the debtor an opportunity to convert to a different chapter. Another thing that the U.S. Trustee does is monitor for things like fraud. Is there dishonesty going on in the bankruptcy case? And if so, well, then the U.S. Trustee will refer the case to the Office of the United States Attorney for prosecution for fraud, perhaps for perjury. And just as a little twist of the knife, as it were, because the Office of the U.S. Trustee is a subdivision of the U.S. Department of Justice, one of the investigative tools that office has is the FBI. So they do investigate cases, and I always make sure that my clients understand that it's very important to tell the truth in the bankruptcy papers. It's very important to tell the truth at any hearings, because if you don't tell the truth, the good news is you'll end up in a federal penitentiary. The bad news is you'll end up in a penitentiary. Now, within the Chapter 11 context, there's a little bit more hands-on activity from the Office of the United States Trustee. The U.S. Trustee will conduct an initial debtor interview shortly after the case is filed. You get some sense of what's going on with the case. Is this a case that has a hope of success? What is the exit strategy? The U.S. Trustee's office will also preside at a meeting of creditors under Section 341A of the Bankruptcy Code, because generally there isn't a Chapter 11 trustee unless, of course, it's a Subchapter 5 or something's gone terribly wrong and a Chapter 11 trustee has been appointed. Then that trustee will make recommendations to the court regarding the plan, that is the U.S. Trustee. And the U.S. Trustee will monitor the financial affairs of the debtor. The debtor, after filing a Chapter 11, has to close all bank accounts and then open up new bank accounts called debtor in possession accounts. And every single month, the debtor has to file something called a monthly operating report that gives a breakdown of the financial activity of that debtor for that particular month. So the U.S. Trustee will monitor that to make sure that what's going on in the debtor's financial life matches with what the debtor has put in the bankruptcy papers and any other pleadings in the case. As a result, of course, the U.S. Trustee gets paid. And I mentioned earlier the U.S. Trustee quarterly fees. Those are collected by the U.S. Trustee every quarter, as the term suggests. And if the debtor isn't paying those quarterly fees, that's grounds for the case either to be dismissed or converted to Chapter 7. Now, as long as you're keeping the U.S. Trustee happy, generally you don't hear a lot from the U.S. Trustee. File those monthly operating reports each month, submit to the trustee proof of insurance, because the debtor is required to have insurance on all motor vehicles, all real property. But generally, the U.S. Trustee is not the enemy of the case, unless you start falling short of the statutory requirements. Now, there is another thing that the U.S. Trustee gets involved in very early in the case. Here in the Central District of California, we are required within 7 days of the petition date, that is, within 7 days of filing the bankruptcy case, to submit something called the 7-day package. Well, unsurprising, since it has to be submitted within 7 days. And it contains great volumes of documentation establishing what's going on with the debtor's life. The U.S. Trustee's office will go over that very carefully to make sure that the case really is on track, because the U.S. Trustee doesn't want a case languishing that has no hope of ever proceeding to confirmation. So there are other things associated with the U.S. trustee, but I think for purposes of this chat, this is just enough to give you a little bit of flavor.